Good morning. Waiting for the verdict in the Angela Hock, Nebraska versus Angela Hock case. Also monitoring what's going on in the Aaron Dean case. Some drama. There's been some issues with folks violating the gag order, particularly a councilman by the last name of Nelson, who is in front of the judge, but the courtroom is now locked. Here comes the judge for our verdict.
Good morning, everyone. Before I announce the verdict, I want to acknowledge the attorneys in this case for their hard work and professionalism that they showed during this case. The attorneys presented their cases very well. For starters, Angela Hock's actions were likely unlawful by her acting as a lay midwife in the home delivery of the nose baby.
Here's the verdict.
Under Nebraska law, her actions could be seen as the unlawful practice of medicine under the Uniform Credentialing Act and in violation of the Certified Nurse Midwifery Practice Act. Any violation of these acts would be a Class 3 misdemeanor for a first offense. Further, any person engaging in the practice of any profession or business without the appropriate credentials may be restrained by temporary and permanent injunctions. And finally, practice of such profession or operation of such business without a credential after receiving a cease and desist order from the director of the Department of Health and Human Services is a Class 3 felony. Angela Hock, however, is charged with negligent child abuse resulting in death, a Class 2A felony under Nebraska Revised Stat Section 28-707. Also, the court notes that the parents in this case have certain constitutional rights involving their medical choices for home delivery of their baby.
Good to see you, Grandma.
Although the court recognizes that the parents' choices are not absolute. This court expresses no opinion on whether home births in general are wise or prudent. This is an issue for the prospective parents and the Nebraska legislature.
I still don't know where he's going.
Further, this case is not a civil case where the plaintiff has alleged that Angela Hock acted negligently. This is a criminal case where the state has charged Angela Hock with criminal negligent child abuse resulting in the heartrending death of Vera. There is a vast difference between civil negligence and criminal negligence. While it is true that Angela Hock is not a licensed midwife, she does have education, training, and experience in childbirth. Under the facts of this case, the elements which the state must prove by evidence beyond a reasonable doubt in order to convict the defendant, Angela Hock, of negligent child abuse resulting in death. 1, that the defendant did cause or permit Vera to be placed in a situation that endangered her safety or physical health, or B, to deprived of necessary care. And 2, that the defendant did so negligently. And 3, that the defendant's conduct in doing so proximately caused the death to Vera. And 4, that the defendant did so on or about June 14th through June 15th, 2019 in Douglas County, Nebraska. And 5, that at said time, Vera was a minor child. Angela Hock first argues that the state has failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was criminally negligent. Revised Stat Section 28-7 in Men's 9 negligently refers to criminal negligence and means that Angela Hock knew or should have known of the danger involved and acted recklessly with respect to the safety or physical health or necessary care of Vera. Recklessly means disregarding a substantial and unjustifiable risk that Vera's safety or health or necessary care would be endangered in
It's also my birthday.
Disregard from what a reasonable law-abiding person would have done. What makes this case very troubling for the court is to try to separate the rights of the parents to choose a home birth with the criminal charge against Angela Hock. The Noes knew beforehand what Angela Hock was all about, and they chose a home birth. In fact, the Noes rehired her after they tried a home delivery with the first child approximately 1.5 years earlier. At no time did Angela Hock misrepresent herself. Once Vera was determined to be in a breech position, Angela Hock gave the Noes the option of going to the hospital.
This is not guilty.
It is unclear from this record whether Angela Hock knew there was a prolapsed cord. Although Angela Hock did not provide the Noes with all the risks associated with the breech baby, it was the Noes' choice, and they chose to continue with the birth at home. Some 30 minutes or so later, Emily Noes started to deliver Vera. What happened next was tragic. But everyone involved in this case, from the Noes, Angela Hock, Mickey, the firefighters and paramedics, and the doctors and the nurses at the hospital, acted to the best of their abilities to save Vera. In applying the elements outlined above to the case before the court cannot find that the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Angela Hock acted criminally, that is, negligently caused or permitted the minor child Vera to be placed in a situation that endangered her safety or physical health or deprived her of necessary care. The court finds Angela Hock not guilty because the court has found that Angela Hock's actions were not criminally negligent. The court will not address the other issues raised by her. It is therefore ordered that the defendant, Angela Hock, is found to be not guilty. I will file this verdict with full citations momentarily, and the parties are excused. You're welcome.
Her hipster lawyer is not there. That's odd. Especially since the judge essentially just kind of regurgitated, or that's not the right word, but he adopted much. That ruling adopted a lot of the defense attorney's closing argument. And when I hear it that way, I have to say I think not guilty might have been the right decision. I think it was the right decision. After hearing the closing arguments I listened to last night, I tried to come on, but I listened to a little bit of the closing arguments last night, and then I think they did pretty well. I think it was right after listening to his ruling and the closing arguments. I think she's been locked up, so I think this means she gets to go home.
Oh my God, he's saying I'm pregnant.
Oh, what else are we gonna get on that? Yeah, so the paralegal, I had no idea that the paralegal was actually pregnant until just now. The paralegal's the one with the pink hair. The mics pick up everything here.
Yeah, that was huge. That was huge.
Yeah, I really wish I could have watched the closing arguments with everybody because it kind of changed my mind. Unfortunately, I was listening to them on the way to and from hockey practice and things like that last night. But, I'm from the U.S., Tom. So let me pull this down, and then let's pull up and see what's going on in the Aaron Dean case. So far, it sounds like a lot of drama going on in the Aaron Dean case. Drama to the effect of the family did interviews with Good Morning America this morning, and a councilman did interviews last night as well, all of whom were under gag orders. All of whom were under gag orders because they're still witnesses. They're still the penalty phase. And the judge was not happy. That said, he did something from all the reporting, and it's still kind of a fluid situation, but from all the reporting, it sounds like he did something kind of antithetical to our system, and that he locked the courtroom this morning. So let me pull up WFAA and see if I can get any more information on that. I'm not going to be able to do the whole hearing today, but I at least want to see if we can get an update here. Oh, okay, we're live in here, Dean. Let's see what's going on. Like I said, I probably won't be able to stay on it too long. Got some stuff. Yeah, he kicked out all the reporters, but cameras are back on. So let's see what's going on. What a verdict. I got to tell you, I was with the chat. It sounded horrible. I would have put the mom on trial, opposed to Angela Hock. But then after listening to closing arguments and then listening to that ruling, I think it's totally right.
Yes.
So in this case, did you review the personal history information from the court?
So they're qualifying the psychologist that's going to testify, and I don't know on whose behalf.
That information, and you said that there are some other forms that are filled out. What other forms are filled
When they come to the office, they fill out and initial the consent forms for the evaluation. They fill out just a brief information sheet that lists their name, date of birth, phone number, email address, that type of thing.
And did this defendant fill out your background information form in this case?
Yes. We provide them with a background information form when they get to the office that they fill out before the interview.
And so when they're filling that information out, are you looking over the information that's provided by the Fort Worth Police Department?
Yes, or I've already looked over it before
100%.
that time.
So after they fill out the information, the background information form for your office in the lobby, what's the next thing?
So the next thing they do is start in on the psychological testing. So they complete their psychological testing. Once they're through with that, then they see me for an interview.
So let's go through the different processes for the psychological testing. Take me through the two different types of personality or psychological testing that is done.
Sure. So in conjunction with the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, they provide some standards with what type of testing needs to be done. In particular, they state that there needs to be at least one assessment
Interesting.
of psychopathology.
I could see why the state would want to show that, but I could also see it kind of cutting both ways.
Of normal or universal personality traits. So we conduct the testing of both of those things, two different type of tests. In this case, he completed the PAI, which is the Personality Assessment Inventory, which is a test of psychopathology, general psychological functioning, personality functioning. And then he also completed the NEO-PI3, which is the test of universal or normal personality traits. So it's not looking at psychopathology, it's just looking by self-report how he assesses himself in terms of general traits, like how extroverted he thinks he is, how conscientious he thinks he is, that type of thing.
Can you explain to us in more depth what psychopathology is?
Psychopathology is just an abnormal psychological functioning.
And those two tests, are those accepted as, are they required to have a general psychopathology as well as a personality test when conducting the these pre-employment interviews for law enforcement?
Yes, they are.
And are these the most common that are used, the personality assessment inventory and the NEO personality inventory?
I'd say they're definitely in the group of what's most commonly used.
How are these two assessments conducted? Where are they done?
They're done in our testing room via computer administration. So the items are on the screen, they're responding on the computer, it follows along as they go.
And about how long does it take to complete? Let's just first talk, is there one that's done before the other one?
It doesn't have to be. Typically, they take the personality assessment inventory first with how our office administers.
Patty, I haven't heard about
they can be done
Skylar's
in
case.
either order.
Send me the link.
Let's
I'll check it
first
out.
talk about the PAI, the personality assessment inventory. The test that's determining the psychopathology of the individual. How long does that take?
It's not timed, so it can vary depending on how long it takes a person to read the items and respond. But in general, typically around 45 minutes to an hour.
And can you give us some examples of the types of questions or how this assessment is done?
I can't give you the specific. There are statements. Each item is a statement that you then respond to. So a statement might be something like, I enjoy spending hours, or I enjoy spending time with my friends, or I have trouble sleeping. Just a number of various statements.
Yeah, Maddie, I've heard of that case.
That is false,
that has not gone to trial yet,
slightly true, most true.
Oh man, this feed's bad.
Inventory. What is as far as the NEO personality inventory, how is that administered? The same way?
Same way. It's a computer administration. Again, there's items that they respond to, that they have a range of responses. For that one, they're responding anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree. There's a range.
And so overall, after these two assessments are done, is there a result of some sort that's given to you?
Yes, there's a report for each assessment that's provided.
Is that
Yeah, Maddie, please send that to me. I got to review that. That sounds very interesting.
Interview the defendant.
Before. So I review the testing results before in case I want to review any of that or ask any follow-up questions with them. It's also required as part of the TCOL instruction that the interview has to come after the testing.
And so overall, the personality assessment inventory, the NEO personality inventory, are both of those, would you agree with, based on self-reporting, whatever they answer, and then it's reported to you?
Yes, but the PAI is a little different in that it assesses the extent, what we call validity or impression management. It assesses the extent to which a person is trying to present themselves maybe better than they are or with little faults, or if they're trying to present themselves as having more problems than is actually present. The NEO doesn't do that.
And how are those safeguards? How does that show up on a test if somebody's trying to seem better or to seem like they have more problems?
There are specific scales, what are called validity scales, a type of test to where it analyzes their response pattern and it gives you a score to reflect how likely that kind of issue might be present or not.
And depending the type of, I guess, the request given, whether it be pre-employment or maybe for court, have you seen that before where individuals will try to act like they have more problems or more issues?
Many times.
Have you seen where people try to also, I guess, fake the test out or over-exaggerate how good they are?
Many times.
Try to kind of fake out the test.
There definitely can be some significant positive or negative impression management depending on the context of the evaluation, yes.
And so the positive impression management, if you do see
Thanks, Maddie.
how do you make sure that the test is still valid?
Well, there's a range of what's acceptable for that inherent in the
morning,
test.
Amber.
So it interprets the level that's at, and then it gives you some information in terms of if it's at a certain level, then the test
Those
is
coming in,
considered
we've
invalid.
switched from
If it's below that level, then the interpretation suggests that you should interpret the rest
the
of the
verdict
test
in
with
the
some caution.
Angela
There
Hock
might be
case. She was
some
found not
distortion
guilty.
here, but it's
So now
still
switch
able
back
to
to
be
the Aaron Dean
interpreted.
case.
So the test guide.
All
This
right.
is
And so we're
for dear
whenever you do review
the
the
state
NEO
psychologist
personality inventory and the results,
who is going
and
to show that
the
say that
results, did you
Aaron Dean failed his psychological exam before he was hired
Yes.
onto the Fort Worth Police Department.
Is there one that you prefer to start with as far as whether the personality assessment, inventory, or video?
The personality assessment inventory is the first test that he took and the first test that I discussed with him, if you want to go in order.
Yeah, let's go in order. Let's start there.
Full disclosure, I won't be able to stay with this
So
too super long. I have a bunch of
What did you discuss within the PAI?
work
Well, given that there were
work to do today,
indications
some
from
kid
the
stuff to do today
PAI
as well,
of
but I'll hang with it,
grandiosity and some
at least
personal
till
difficulties,
top of the hour.
including that this person would likely to be seen as domineering or over-controlling, interpersonal difficulties related to that, that they might be someone, these profile types tend to be those who are very concerned with sort of the facade of superiority and not appearing passive or
That's
weak
what I was
in any
thinking
way.
too, Maddie.
So those type of things,
It
given
at
that
least
they
cuts both
suggested
ways.
some possible problem areas, I asked him about those type of things.
Will you define the grandiosity to us, please?
Sure. Grandiosity is just an inflated sense of self. So an inflated sense of your own abilities, your own qualities, things that you see, like arrogance, entitlement, those type of things are what we think of with grandiosity.
And what about domineering? Define that for us.
So domineering is someone who tends to be overbearing or controlling of others.
And superiority, you said with superiority. Describe that to us. Can you define that more for me?
Sure. So just again, it's the idea of having a very high opinion of yourself and being very concerned about appearing weak or submissive at all on the outside to others.
And so when you see these particular personality traits, what do you discuss with them?
Well, I asked him a number of follow-up questions in terms of to try to get from his perspective how he saw himself in this way, his own assessment of his abilities, and how he would assess his interaction with others.
And give me some examples of how you ask those questions.
So I asked him to rate himself on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is the worst person possible, 5 is an average person, 10 is a perfect person with no
diagnosis
flaws. I had him rate himself
from
on that
my
scale.
perspective.
And what was his result?
He gave himself a 9.
A 9 out of 10.
Yes.
Is that, in your experience, a higher rating than you typically see?
Yes.
And so is that consistent with what that particular personality test had assessed as being?
Yeah, so they're going to hammer him on personality, which isn't really helpful to him.
Did he indicate that he's not a 10 out of 10?
He indicated
psychological
that he would be a 10 out of
diagnosis
10,
can be mitigating.
if not for
Personality
categorized as
disorders
some things that he had done in the past
are not mitigating.
as he described it, piss people
They're
off.
aggravating.
And
Ask Amber.
what other types of things did you discuss with him regarding this grandiosity portion of the personality test?
Well, I asked him just in terms of any faults or flaws that he would see in himself or things that he felt like he might need to improve upon. He said he had noted on my form that his bad fault or flaw was chewing ice. And then when I asked him about, are there any flaws or things you would like to improve upon or could improve upon, he indicated that he felt like he was too messy and he could be neater. I asked him if there was anything else that he might need to improve upon, and he said no.
And your opinion is saying that someone's messy and chewing ice. Do you typically see people have more that they'd like to improve upon in their own lives?
Typically, I mean, it's not out of the ordinary in this type of evaluation where someone is up for a job that they're not presenting you with everything negative about themselves, but I typically see a little bit more than this for sure.
All right, and then what else did you ask him about in terms of
My biggest character flaw is my biggest
So
flaw
I
thing I'm
asked him
working
just
on is
about
that I
various occupations or
wish.
skills and whether or not he felt that he could do these things or not do these things. I went through a number, some of which he said he could do, some of which he said he couldn't. Things that he said that he could do was that he felt like he could fly a commercial airliner. When asked why he felt like he could do that, he said that he had played a flight simulator game when he was a kid. He said that he could teach an advanced calculus class. Things that he said that he could not do was that he was not qualified to be president. He could not perform brain surgery. He indicated that he could not teach.
So in fairness, the dude has a advanced engineering degree. He could probably teach
Yes.
advanced calculus
What
class.
you reviewed is his personal history, background, employment, education. Did he have any pilot?
The plan is pretty fine.
Not that I'm aware of.
So based on the playing of those flight simulator game, he believes he could pilot an aircraft.
That's the way I took it, yes.
And is that consistent with somebody that has an overinflated view of themselves
Very much so.
and their abilities?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what's next? What else, as far as your evaluation, did you see and discuss with him?
In terms of the testing, I did ask him, since there were some indications on there of this overbearing, over-controlling type of interaction with others. He said that he had never been told that he was too dominant or over-controlling, or
Yeah,
he
so
was
now I
impatient.
can
He
see why
indicated
why they would call
he
this
is
guy
able to take
and
charge,
how
but he
this
is
testimony
also does
hurts
just
or
fine with being submissive to others. Basically reported that he had never had any problems or issues with that.
Did that surprise you?
Yes and no. I would say, given his grandiosity, I wasn't expecting to hear a lot from him that maybe painted himself in a negative light. But I was somewhat surprised that if that was his personality style, that he might not have ever heard that, at least from someone else, even if he didn't agree with it.
All right. And so what else was discussed with
See you, Lulu.
him
Thanks
as
for stopping by.
far as, the concerns that you saw on the test?
The majority of my discussion with him in terms of concern of testing revolved around those two areas, his grandiosity and then his interpersonal style and difficulties that might result from that. That was the main focus of the follow-up from the testing, because those were the two main problematic issues.
And when he talked about rating himself, and he would be a 10 with the exception of some stupid things that offended or bothered people, did he go through and talk about the specifics of what those were?
He provided 3 examples, yes.
Did you also, in reviewing his personal history from the Fort Worth Police Department, were some of those things mentioned?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go through those if we can. Tell me one of those things that he mentioned in the testing and in talking to you.
So one of the things that he noted was that he had had an incident where he had gone into a fast. Yes.
All right, so we have a sidebar. Hey, good job, Judge, just having a sidebar instead of kicking everyone out of the courtroom and locking the door. Not cool. Courtrooms are public, are designed for the public. Our system is not, it's antithetical to our system to ever lock a courtroom like that. And I don't know exactly what happened. If it was a security issue, okay, maybe. But other than that, not cool. He definitely kicked reporters out. I don't get it. What I think really happened is that he wanted to admonish a city councilman and didn't want to do it in front of everybody, so he kicked everybody out. I can understand the thinking there, but that's not how we do things here. And we're going to close it down again. And Aaron Dean really has no shame. I wonder if he brought that up in his grandiose exam.
Everyone may be seated. Just digging in. Judge, before we get into that, I want to put it in the record. Our first objection here is that we had a motion to look at this matter. It was granted by the court before we began testimony in this case. The court instructed the state to approach the bench, let the court know before they intend to go into any of these matters. And they were preparing to go into it before they were interrupted with objection, without approaching the bench, without giving the court an opportunity to rule on these matters.
All right. Let's go.
Yeah, I did. It was one of
Okay, I was just asking you questions about the particulars of what was reported in
a
the
supporter of
file.
an
the
Nazi
personal
and the
history
Jefferson
file
supporter, if you
police
call her
department.
that. I
Can you
honestly
talk
thought he
about
was
the
going to
very
lock
first
her
one?
up for 24
Sure.
hours.
So the
Kentucky
first
court.
thing that
She
we
sounded
discussed
pissed.
was related to an incident where he was in a fast food restaurant and he had an airsoft gun that was on his hip. Evidently, police were called and talked to him about that. He wasn't charged with anything, but was told that that wasn't a good idea. The next thing that he discussed, he said that it was about a year later. All of these occurred in his early 20s. He indicated was another incident with an airsoft gun where he and a friend were playing, shooting at each other in an area that was at or near a church or a residential area near a creek. He said that there was a homeowner, I guess, that had seen them and had called police. Police had showed up and gave them a stern talking to, is the way that he described it in this personnel packet.
And I had asked you earlier when you were
Oh,
on the
got you.
presence of the jury during the 705 hearing, if you reviewed, and I actually think defense counsel asked you as well, if you had reviewed this background information. With the Fort Worth
I don't like the idea of
Department.
judges kicking
You
everyone
answered
out.
yes, correct?
Yes.
And you also had shown in, I believe it was that's part of the psychological evaluation, is that you do an interview with him to discuss those matters, correct?
To discuss matters of his history is part of it, yes.
All right. And then, did you also discuss with him a matter that pertained to him being a student at UTA?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about that.
So he indicated,
This
I
is the
saw in his
interesting one.
packet that he had a history of assault. And so I asked him about that. He indicated that when he was in his early 20s, he was at a college library, that there was a girl that was flirting with him, that he said some things to her and then touched her, and then she filed charges, and that he had to pay a fine and complete a sexual harassment course or class.
Now, was there a particular
That's not a good
way that those different things, those incidences, in the way that he described them, that was consistent with what you had seen on these assessments?
Yes.
In what way, sir?
I felt like that he was pretty flippant in the way that he described it.
Would that be consistent with someone that has an overinflated view of themselves?
Yes.
Would that be consistent with the overall assessments, both of the assessments that you reviewed, and with the way he responded to those incidences?
Yes, and with the way he interacted with me as well.
And when we were outside the presence of the jury, I didn't go through each one of these specifics, but the defense counsel asked you to go through and interpret some of your handwriting so that we could understand what you said on these pages.
Yes.
Okay. Is there some handwriting at the very back of the background information form? Actually, kind of handwriting all over, I guess, these 5 pages.
Yes, there's handwriting at the end of that form of his, where
I
there's
guess
his
my core
signature,
question
and then
is
the last
if he
bit is on the next
failed his
page, where there's
psychological
handwriting there as well as
exam,
a part of the summary.
why was he allowed on the force? That's a big question. Like,
Looking now here at the Fort Worth Police Department's background information. Did you also ask him about whether or not, or was it, I guess, provided to you that he had applied to other police departments before?
Yes, and I asked him about that as well.
And
oh great, no
did
other
he
police
indicate
department
whether
would
he
take
had
him
ever
on.
applied to Fort Worth Police Department before?
Yes,
And
This looks
what
real
was the
good on
result
Fort
of
Worth
applying
PD.
to the police department before?
he told me that he had applied in around 2014 or 2015, that he had passed a psychological evaluation, but that he had withdrawn due to concerns about his physical fitness at the time.
And did you look through in the background information for Fort Worth Police Department whether he had ever applied to Reno Police Department?
Yes,
And what was the result of his application to that police department?
he failed the physical.
Okay. And had he also applied to the Grand Prairie Police Department?
Yes,
And when was that?
that was in 2016, I believe, per his packet.
Was there also some information in this background form from the police department?
Yeah, I'm
that he
totally
had
confused
been
by
in
that.
trouble before for punctuality, being late to work?
Yes,
Okay. Was there also information about him having several traffic citations and several, I guess, a mention regarding his insurance, his auto insurance?
yes,
I think the jury's out right now.
Now, when you asked, or when you reviewed this background information, did he put the 2 instances with the gun and the incident involving UTA, are those both also in that background information?
the information that he filled out for my office.
No, the information he filled out for the Fort Worth Police Department.
Yeah,
Yes,
And is that also
sounds like they're
in the
just
information
more
that he
desperate
filled
for
out with you?
officers now, I guess.
well, in the information that he filled out with me, he noted his assault. There was nothing that he wrote on his background form related to the incidents with the airsoft guns, but I did talk to him and ask him about that.
And why was that important to you to talk to him about that?
Well, just because they were interactions that he had had with law enforcement in the past, and that to assess his behavior and judgment at the time and what occurred.
Did he provide the psychological evaluation from Fort Worth Police Department that he had said he had taken and passed?
No,
If he had provided that to you, would that be a part of the file that you would have provided to me?
yes,
Did he indicate, we've explained this a bit, but I want to get a little bit more specific since we're outside the presence of the jury. When he talked about the incident in college at UTA with a female, did he indicate to you whether she, the female, was being flirtatious with him as well?
that's the way he described it.
That's the way I took it the first time, lady.
Did it appear to you that he was minimizing, or I guess you used the term flippant, minimizing or being flippant about this prior incident?
Yes,
Did these things that we've mentioned specifically involving the guns and the incident with UTA, did those all appear to be consistent with someone that bears the same personality traits as this defendant?
yes,
And Judge, for purposes of this record, since we're outside the presence of the jury, I wasn't planning on getting into him being late to work. I wasn't planning on getting into him using his auto insurance traffic citations for any, I think, speeding or wrecks. But I just wanted to flesh that out since we're outside the presence of the jury. But for purposes of this hearing, I'll pass it.
Thank you. Mr. Gill,
Don't have any additional questions, but I have some objections.
go ahead.
Not only did the state violate the court's ruling on the motion in limine, but they're also attempting to get into matters that they did not provide to us in pretrial disclosure.
Okay, let me hear about that.
We were not provided any notice that there was any bad act involving airsoft gun or being spoken to by the police or anything along those lines. So we would object to the state going into anything regarding that.
Response?
Also,
I'm sorry, response?
May I respond? Yes.
Yes.
You did. Yeah, specifically, we did, and I can go through, does your have a copy of our?
I do not, I do not have the gym system up right now, so.
Man, I hate the feed from this courtroom.
And I can go through, it's actually quite lengthy, Your Honor, so I may need just a minute. It's 13 pages. But I believe specifically I did go through and discuss in the 404 notice that was provided to defense back on April of 2022. And just to be clear also, so that you know, Judge, we actually didn't provide this into GEMS or e-file it for a particular reason. We had an agreement with defense counsel that the 404 extraneous notice would be provided via email and acknowledged.
Then I wouldn't have a copy then, would I?
That's correct. But I did go through and discuss the various traffic violations. Also, it's shown that he had committed the offense of assault in college. That's also mentioned. I talked about the receiving disciplinary action from employers, and I believe that we also just discussed his, if you look.
I would say absolutely yes. And that was my first thought.
On
It's
page
like, wow,
12,
it's
it
kind
discussed
of
him
open.
having, I discussed
Maybe get him
some
locked up
other
longer,
witness,
but
about him having shooting guns,
definitely open
having
up the
guns,
city
being very
to
proficient
a
with guns,
lawsuit.
and overly confident about guns, always being the person that wanted to protect others with his gun at the church. And I will probably just need a few more minutes, Judge, as far as if I gave into the specifics about the underlying incidences that are in the background report that this witness reviewed. I did give notice that he had failed the psychological evaluation and had those particular personality traits. Those are things that are all considered within that packet of information that he's testified about. All of that packet of information was provided to defense counsel, the background information, as well as his failure of the psych eval. That was actually ordered, that entire file was ordered by Judge Hagerman at this point, months and months and months ago.
All right, I've got some concerns about the airsoft stuff. So I'm going to sustain your objection. Don't go into the airsoft guns with this witness. Okay, the UTA situation, that's fine. But the airsoft guns, stay away from.
Well, I have further objections about this.
All right, go ahead. I didn't give that to you.
That is that this witness can state his opinion based upon the same opinion that he's already stated, based upon his testing and the other portions of his interview, without going into the underlying facts of that incident. He reaches the same opinion based upon that incident that he reached upon his general overall testing and the other things told to him by the defendant, which is.
So your objection is into the UTA deal is not the fact that the defendant was charged with that, but going into the underlying facts.
Yes, sir.
Well, and I don't intend to get, the only testimony, and by the way, we do intend on calling the victim of that particular case, and I think she'll be here or may already be here. So we'll get into specifics at that point.
Oh, wow.
But as far as specifics, I mean, it is the information that the defendant told him. It's part of what he was asking and trying to clarify on as far as what the results of the personality traits were, his minimization and flippant. I don't intend to get into anything
I
more
think
specific about what happened.
Fort Worth
This
PD
witness,
is
with the exception of
definitely
asking
what
him
opened a lawsuit.
with what he
bad
told to
policies,
happen,
procedures.
simple assault dealing with a
Probably
female,
hired a guy they
assault
shouldn't have
dealing with a
hired.
female. Did he minimize that? Did he appear to be flippant about that? And did he appear to indicate that she was also being flirtatious with him, which is consistent with why he believes it to be flippant and minimization of it. But I don't intend to get into anything more.
All right, I'll let you ask very general questions in regard to Dr. Clayton's evaluation of his response.
She doesn't need it here. If she has the victim of the other case, it's
Getting into
not worth fighting
underlying
over
facts,
this one.
because he's
Just
not
bring it in
factoring
later.
this in regard to that charge. You have a further objection. So your objection would be overruled. To that objection, yes.
We further object that any probative value of that matter is substantially outweighed by prejudicial effect, especially since this witness is already basing his opinion on other matters.
That objection is overruled. You may have
This
a
is
running
sentencing
objection to that also.
Prejudicial gets a lot easier to
Are we ready for the
overcome
jury?
State's
in
ready.
sentencing.
Okay.
I'd ask the court to inquire if Emmanuel Mata, MATA, is present in the courtroom. If they are, I'd ask them to be brought forward and sworn and placed under the rules.
Is there Emmanuel Mata present in the courtroom? There does not appear to be Emmanuel Mata.
What's your name, sir? Anthony. Anthony, what's your last name? I'd ask Anthony Lasone to be brought forward and sworn in, Your Honor.
Come on,
Great question. The judge excluded it from the actual trial because he felt that it would be the prejudicial value.
No, I need
It
to
would
swear.
be more prejudicial than probative.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now, you know what? Just come up to the rail. Just stand right there.
And I think he's probably right on
Raise your
that.
right hand for me.
This is the
Solemnly swear or
appropriate
affirm
forum for it.
testimony given this cause to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Uh-oh,
Would you tell me your first and last name and spell it for my court reporter, please?
this guy's in trouble.
You have been sworn as a witness in this case, and there is a rule of procedure in effect that says that you cannot be in court while you're testifying, unless you're testifying. You're not to discuss this case with anyone else in anticipating of you being called as a witness. So if you'll remain outside in the hallway and do not talk to anybody out in the hallway, you
Okay.
understand?
So they just
All right,
did
thank you
that
very
so that
much.
he can't be in the courtroom anymore because he may be called as a witness.
Sure. Everybody ready?
State's ready.
Let's go.
Man, that's gotta suck in court for sentencing. You just sit in court for sentencing after you've already been found for an actual full
Okay.
hearing, or almost like second trial. It's gotta suck to sit in court after I've already been found guilty.
Okay, so folks, we're still outside the presence of the jury. Justin, that was kind of an interesting situation. They swore in this Anthony Lazon. That was odd. I mean, why
That was not one of
do you think that happened?
I don't know. Sometimes defense attorneys or even, attorneys from the state, they'll specifically target folks in the gallery to get them out of the courtroom because they may be causing some type of disturbance, maybe online on Twitter or whatever. So
Yeah, but you can't have a phone in that courtroom. That judge will not play.
well, this is true. So I'm really interested in trying to see why would they kick Anthony out of the courtroom or swear him in as a witness to effectively kick him out
because
of
they
the
might
courtroom.
call him their
Do you
genius.
He's not a witness in this case.
Like, what would he be a fact witness to?
Right. I don't know.
What do you know about him? Who is he?
Anthony's been really involved in the community over the past few years. In the cases that I've been directly engaged with, he's provided protest support, but also community engagement. He's a pillar in the activist community. So that could be the reason why the defense wanted him out.
The judge locked the people
You
out
see
of
Lee
the
Merritt's
court.
not in the courtroom. You see other
And
activists aren't there. So
we're still
maybe
trying to
they
figure out totally why.
identified him as someone that is a
I
supporter
think
of the
he
Jefferson
was
family.
admonishing some public figures.
They
and
wanted him out of the courtroom.
didn't
so
want
they
that on
used,
camera.
swearing in him as a witness as the means of doing so.
Interesting. So, what do you think
All
about
right, I'm
doing
putting
that?
these people on mute. I can't send them anymore. You guys can read what they're saying if you want to hear. Yeah, they swore him as a witness. I agree that they're probably not going to call him. They just don't want him in the courtroom. and it might just because like they don't like him. Like, yeah, there's nothing dull about this courtroom. There's nothing dull about this case. This is super politically charged. All right, we're gonna go back.
To minimize whatever happened back in college to you.
Yes.
And did he appear to be, what was his attitude about it in general?
Yeah, it was
I
a
thought
city
he was
councilman.
pretty discretion and
City Councilman
Would that be
Nielsen.
consistent with his personality traits that you had seen so far?
He was pretty outspoken.
yes, you would expect
no,
to see someone
in
who's high
in condemnation of
narcissism
the
be
shooting.
quick to take credit, slow to take responsibility, kind of thing. And that's kind of what I felt like I saw when he was talking about that.
Now, the jury's heard you refer to grandiosity, but the term narcissistic, that is a term that we haven't yet defined. Can you tell us what that means, sir?
Sure. So those two are certainly related, but narcissism has to do with not only a person's sense of self, so they have an overinflated sense of themselves and their own abilities, but it also relates to how they see and view others. So not only do they tend to have a high view of themselves, they don't tend to have a very high view of others or their opinions. They often have a low tolerance for disagreement. They tend to be overbearing or domineering with other people. They can be manipulative at times. They certainly have an issue with taking in information that doesn't agree with them. In that way, their judgment and perception tends to be limited to their own ideas of reference.
Now I want to move to the NEO personality assessment. Did you also, well, actually, before we get to that, we talked earlier about the PAI validity scales. Was there some concern regarding this defendant's positive impression?
Yes, he had what is categorized as a moderate degree of positive impression management. So not to the extent that would invalidate the test, but to the extent to where the test interpretation
And we are
suggests
back in front of the
you
jury,
need to take that into account, that there's likely some minimization that's going on here of any type of faults or difficulties.
And so the results of that particular test may actually underrepresent the concerns in those areas.
Correct.
Because he
Probably.
has, I guess, overstated, or in his responses that would have affected that particular section.
That's correct.
All right. Now let's talk about the NEO evaluation. Is there anything else in the PAI as far as in your report?
No, the main things from the PAI that were noted, we discussed.
I'll take that a step further, Kara.
Grandiosity and interpersonal.
Get involved in your local politics. Run for something really local. Run for city council.
Or actually, let me ask you one question real quick about the particular clinical scale. A part of
Yeah,
that
I mean,
personality
gag orders
test
in
that we're
high-profile
discussing,
cases like this
was there a
aren't uncommon at all. But
concern, or at least the notation,
there's been a lot of
there was
violating,
moderate
which isn't awesome.
elevation in this defendant's aggression or verbal aggression.
Yes, that's part of the interpersonal issues that I was discussing before. He did have a moderate elevation on a scale related to verbal aggression.
Can that be problematic if you are seeking employment to be a police officer?
Very much so.
Now, let's move to the NEO. Explain that to us. What were some of the findings regarding that particular test?
So the NEO, again, it differs from the PAI in that it doesn't assess for impression management. So if there's some indication that some impression management is going on, it really limits how much you can interpret.
Make sure you sub to the channel and make sure you turn on
beyond it just being
notifications.
their own perception of themselves as a self-report. And in this case, given that it did appear that he was exercising some positive impression management and some guardedness, there wasn't a whole lot to be gleaned from the NEO beyond the way that he saw himself. But it certainly was an indication of whether or not
Yeah, that's right.
there's any
It's
psychopathology
bad for him
there
to
or
break it.
not.
And so I think some family members
overall,
were interviewed on Good Morning America this morning too, who are also already sworn in as witnesses, which is not a good thing. The judge was not happy.
Or I guess the self-inflate or the positive impression, correct?
That's correct. It doesn't measure for that.
Okay. So then how do we determine that it is valid?
Well, the validity on the NEO, it's not designed to measure its validity in that way in terms of impression management. It's designed to just be a self-report. So
The validity on the NEO basically
Calling you out,
asks them if
right.
they understood the questions, and if they responded honestly, and then it looks at how many responses they might not have entered. If there's a certain amount of items you don't enter, then the protocol is considered invalid. But it doesn't look at validity to the extent of impression management the way the PAI does. It's just designed as a self-report or self-reflection of how they see themselves on these personality traits.
And so were the results of the NEO personality test consistent with the results seen on the other personality tests given?
They were, in terms of, you did see some indication of grandiosity and then some interpersonal issues where this person might be more likely to be critical or antagonistic or domineering at times with others. So that, in that way, it was consistent.
As far as your report, did it appear to be that he had indications of a forceful and dominant personalities traits? Or
Yes,
style, rather.
yes.
And we've heard you talk about domineering and dominant personality traits. Why is someone that has a forceful or dominant personality trait or style concerning for being a Fort Worth police officer?
Well, in a number of ways. It certainly impacts their judgment and decision-making, but even more directly, it interacts with or limits their interpersonal functioning. So individuals like that tend to have a low stress tolerance,
Honestly,
low
I
tolerance
think
for
people
disagreement, not very good at conflict
emotional
resolution
diverted,
with others,
and
just interpersonal
so if we're
difficulties
giving
in
them
general with
completely
others,
charitable,
being
they
sort of
thought
critical
that
or
really-
uncaring or unsympathetic
they
to
thought
others.
that, oh,
Those
okay,
things
the
are
verdict has been
all
reached. I'm
issues that can be
out of this
problematic in
gag
this
order
type
and
of
kind of
job
didn't
because you're
really
dealing with
understand
others
how,
on a daily basis, both coworkers and the public.
didn't really
Is
understand
there
that
mention
how
to
the penalty
you,
phase works and that they're still witnesses.
involving his previous
That's being
employment
very, very
and
charitable,
seeking
but
employment
maybe.
with other police departments?
Yes,
And did he seek employment in other police departments?
yes.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, he reported that he had previously applied to this department, Fort Worth Police Department,
So if this
one
sounds
who's seeing me for,
duplicative,
in 2014 or
it's because it is.
2015.
Remember,
He indicated that he
that
passed the
excused the jury
psychological
to kind
evaluation
of,
as part of that application, but that he had withdrawn due to concerns about his own physical fitness.
really offer
He
proof
didn't
to
tell
what
me
he was
about
going
any
to
others,
testify
but
to
there
and
were
then brought the
others
jury back
noted
in.
in his packet, which included that he had previously applied with Reno Police Department and had failed a physical, and that he had also applied to Grand Prairie Police Department, but had withdrawn that to seek this position with Fort Worth.
Now, if he had taken a psychological evaluation with Fort Worth, would that have been provided to you prior to
Good morning,
your
Nikki.
assessment?
Typically, yes. If the agency has a prior evaluation, it's up to them what they provide, but typically we get that type of information.
Had that been provided to you?
No.
Okay, and so the personality traits that you discussed so far, are those traits that you would expect to diminish or go away over time without any treatment or intervention?
Typically, no.
Why not?
Well, because personality traits or structure tends to be, especially once you reach adulthood, tend to be fairly stable over time. You can see some changes in behaviors, things that you can address in terms of symptoms or behaviors, but one's personality structure, once it's established, doesn't tend to change night and day. You don't typically see someone that's highly extroverted at age 30 and then at age 40, they're all of a sudden very, very introverted, unless something big has happened, whether it be treatment or a life event or injury or something like that.
And the particular traits of the overinflated view of themselves, the forceful dominant personality, would that be concerning in terms of how they view, for example, a call when they're responding as a Fort Worth police officer, how they view the steps that they take?
Yes.
Objection, that's beyond the scope of expertise.
Sustained.
And overall, what was your conclusion of this defendant's psychological evaluation?
My conclusion was that he was not psychologically suitable to serve as a police officer
And why is that?
because the results had suggested that he had a narcissistic personality style that would inhibit his judgment, decision-making, interpersonal abilities,
and would make him more likely to engage in behaviors that could put himself and others at risk.
Okay, but then so why did, if I think this guy did the actual initial assessment. Why did you let him get
about
caught
this
then?
particular case, and you learned that this defendant was involved in a criminal case involving the death of an individual. Did you know what happens, or do you
Judge,
ever
we're
know?
gonna object to this. This is something that wasn't disclosed to us, previously.
Let me hear the question.
Do you know what happens to those after they take their psychological evaluation?
No.
Let him answer that question.
No, I submit my report to the agency, and then that's typically the end of the process for me, unless questions.
Would it be surprising to you that someone that bears these particular personality traits then is involved in this
Objection.
type of offense?
No.
Why not?
Well, because again, the higher you are in narcissism, the more likely that you are to engage in things that maybe poor judgment, decision-making, problems interpersonally, overconfidence can impede their judgment. They can tend to be, the higher you are in this, you tend to be more reckless, less prudent, just in general.
Oh, and you mentioned earlier in your testimony that in order to be a police officer with Fort Worth, you have to get a psychological evaluation, correct?
Yes.
And so do you know how he obtained a passing psychological evaluation after you saw him in March of 2017?
I mean, I would assume because I know the appeal process, but I don't have any records or haven't reviewed any evaluations or the procedure on that he underwent.
When you just said appeal procedure, tell us what you mean by that.
So just in general, typically the way this works with agency or department in Texas is that if a person does not pass a psychological, then they can appeal. And as part of that appeal, they see a panel of 3 psychologists, psychiatrists, or doctors who are able to evaluate this. If all 3 of those psychiatrists or psychologists unanimously say that this person is psychologically suitable, then they can pass and move on from that. If not,
Holy
then
shit.
the process stops from there.
And
So
in your
3 other
opinion,
psychologists disagree with
when
you.
you say he is not psychologically suitable, do you have characterizations of whether you can pass or fail a psych eval?
It's a judgment based on the evaluator, but there's not a test score or anything like that where there's a cutoff. It's just my judgment based on the assessment and the job description of what's being asked for.
Are there times when there is a clear, I'm going to use the term pass, but clearly that they are suitable for the employment, and times that it's very clear they are not?
Yes.
Are there also a category where they might be a little bit in the middle, where there's a little gray? Maybe they could, maybe they couldn't. You have some concerns. They might be okay.
Yes, I would say that's where these tend to fall in those 3 categories.
Where did he fall?
He falls in the clearly not suitable.
Wow. So then how did he pass his appeal?
Dr. Clayton, if I said that the practice of psychology is highly subjective, would that be a fair statement?
I think it depends on what aspect of the practice of psychology you're referring to, but it definitely involves, from my standpoint, it involves a clinical judgment that I'm making.
So they
based
said
on
he
that.
failed 1, so then he got to appeal and go through
Yes.
3 others,
There's not
like a
there's not
panel of 3, and
way
passed
to
all
control
3
what
of the
you
other
do to
ones.
Evaluate someone's psychological makeup, is there?
There's not anything like an X-ray that shows you one thing definitively. There's testing you do, interviews you do. From all of that, you try to form an informed clinical opinion. Yes.
And you make your living by examining people and examining situations and developing these opinions, isn't that right?
Yes.
And other psychologists do the same thing.
Yes.
And you know that if Aaron Dean became a Fort Worth police officer, that the opinion of 3 other psychologists, that he was in fact fit for duty. Is that right?
Yes.
So 3 other
That's what I would hammer.
psychologists reached an opinion different from yours. Is that right?
Yes.
And that would have been around the same time that you talked to Mr. Dean. Isn't that right?
I don't know the time frame, but I assumed it was pretty close in time to when I saw him.
And that appeal process is allowed because the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement recognizes that the decision and the opinions made by psychologists in this realm are highly subjective. Isn't that right?
That's my understanding.
Interesting.
So is that the only time that you've ever talked to Aaron Dean?
Yes.
You didn't ever see him?
No.
Did you ever see him after that?
No.
You mentioned that there were a couple of statements that he made that were brought out that you took had to do with the fact that he believed that he could teach calculus. Is that right?
Yes, that he could teach an advanced calculus class.
Did you know at that time that he has a college degree in physics?
Yes.
And that still seems unusual to you that he calculus.
Yes.
You idiot.
Have you ever had a gun pointed at you?
No.
The matters that you talked about here today in front of this jury, one of those matters had to do with an alleged incident that took place at UTA. Is that right?
Yes.
And that matter was brought to your attention in the packet that you received from the Fort Worth Police Department. Is that right?
Yes.
So the Fort Worth Police Department knew about an alleged incident at UTA.
Yes.
Is that right? So that was in the Fort Worth Police Department's packet of information in their hiring pack that they would have had access to when they hired Aaron Dean, correct?
Yes.
We pass the witness.
Redirect.
Can I just 1 second?
Yes, ma'am.
We don't have any questions, Your Honor.
May Dr. Clayton be finally excused.
No objection from the state.
Subject to recall.
If you're available for this, then you have that.
Yes.
Thank you.
See, I think they kind of just told. I mean, the whole idea of three other psychologists disagreed with you kind of makes this testimony mute. Okay, I shouldn't say kind of. It does.
Okay, y'all have a short break that I did. So give me a few minutes, all right? Let's take about 15 minutes, see you in a little bit.
All right, y'all. They're taking a 15-minute break, and unfortunately, I have some work I have to get done today. I'll try to go back live if I can, but I highly doubt it. I think we'll still be going on Monday. I don't see this wrapping up in one day. So at the very worst, I will see you all on Monday morning. Thanks for stopping by, and I appreciate you all. I'll see you Monday morning. Have a good one.